20 million. That is the sheer number of copies sold of a single business book, praised by presidents, embedded into the very DNA of global corporate culture, yet fiercely labeled by modern critics as padded, buzzword-laden fluff.
The divide between its astronomical success and its sharpest critiques is, well, it's a fascinating contradiction. Reviewer Curtis McHale captures this modern frustration perfectly, noting that while there are absolutely worthwhile bits, the core text is buried in terrible padding and relentless buzzword bingo. So how does a framework that is so universally adopted inspire such deep structural criticism?
Welcome back to Learning with Pratik. If you're new here, this is where we break down the world's most fascinating stories, trends, and systems, making the complex incredibly simple. Today, we are conducting an objective explainer of Stephen Covey's cultural monolith, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We're going to strip away the contrived anecdotes, bypass all that padding, and objectively examine the core architecture of his philosophy.
Part 1. The Foundation. Character versus Personality. Now, before Covey even introduces the very first habit, he lays down some absolutely crucial intellectual groundwork. And he did this by analyzing 200 years of success literature. What he found was a stark contrast. You see, before World War I, success literature was deeply rooted in what he calls the character ethic. It focused on fundamental traits, things like integrity, humility, courage, and justice. But after the war, the focus shifted entirely to the personality ethic. Success became this superficial function of public image, quick-fix techniques, and behavioral hacks. Covey argues that lasting effectiveness just can't be built on personality techniques alone. It requires a foundational return to true character.
Part 2. The P/PC balance.
Because true effectiveness doesn't come from merely working harder. It requires a delicate, highly sustainable equilibrium. Covey calls this the P/PC balance. Think of Aesop's classic fable of the golden goose. P stands for production. That's your desired results, or the golden eggs. PC is production capability, the overall health of the asset that actually produces those results, which is the goose itself. So often, organizations and individuals obsess over the golden eggs. They push for constant, relentless production. But think about it. If you pull an all-nighter, sure, your P might be artificially high for a single day. But your PC, your mental and physical health, is completely destroyed. The 7 habits are designed specifically to develop and protect that underlying production capability.
Part 3. The private victory.
The habits themselves actually follow a strict chronological evolution. The very first phase is moving from a state of total dependence to true independence, and this requires 3 foundational habits. Habit 1 is be proactive. This means taking absolute, unapologetic responsibility for your responses to the world. You don't blame circumstances. Instead, you recognize that there is a gap between a stimulus and your response, and in that gap, you actively choose your action. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Covey uses a pretty profound funeral exercise here. You literally envision what you want people to say at your funeral, and you use that ultimate legacy to guide your daily decisions. Habit 3, put first things first, is the implementation phase. It demands fiercely prioritizing activities that align with your core values, rather than just constantly reacting to whatever feels urgent in the moment. And this brilliantly illustrates the overall architecture of the system. When we map out this maturity continuum, notice how the private victory forms an unshakable base. The logic here is that you simply cannot be successful with other people if you haven't first paid the price of success with yourself. These first 3 habits lay down that necessary groundwork. Only once you've achieved true independence internally can you move upward toward the next phase. Part 4. The public victory. Right, so once independence is achieved, combining your individual strengths with others can exponentially multiply your effectiveness. This is the public victory, involving the next 3 habits. Habit 4 is think win/win. This isn't just a corporate buzzword, it's a genuine commitment to seeking mutually beneficial solutions over zero-sum competition. Habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Most people listen simply with the intent to reply. Covey argues we need to practice empathetic diagnosis, truly understanding another person's problem before we even attempt to prescribe our own advice. Finally, habit 6 is synergize. This is creative cooperation. It's the powerful concept that when different, independent minds collaborate effectively, the whole becomes significantly greater than the sum of its parts.
Part 5. Habit 7. Sharpen the saw.
Now, this whole system isn't just a straight line you complete once, it requires deliberate, ongoing maintenance to prevent inevitable burnout. If you're too busy sawing to actually stop and sharpen your blade, your effectiveness plummets. Covey breaks this renewal down into 4 vital dimensions: physical, through exercise and nutrition; mental, through reading and continual learning; social and emotional, through meaningful service and genuine connection; and spiritual, through meditation or clarifying your core values. This continuous upward spiral is what preserves your capacity to practice the other 6 habits.
Part 6. Legacy versus reality. The architecture of these 7 habits is undeniably logical. But as an objective explainer, we really have to pivot to the entirely valid frustrations articulated by modern critics. Let's look at Covey's 6 paradigms of human interaction as a case study. These are introduced during habit 4. They range from win-win all the way down to lose-lose, and finally win-win or no deal. Now, the underlying concept is solid. It's meant to build a truly interdependent reality. But critics argue that the presentation itself is steeped in convoluted corporate speak. The core message, while undeniably profound, is frequently buried under dense, repetitive layers of text that tend to obscure the point rather than clarify it. This juxtaposition is perhaps best summarized by a frustrated modern reviewer who literally read the final chapters multiple times, only to note, "I have no idea what point he was trying to get across, but man can Covey use buzzwords." There is a stark, unavoidable divide between the deep philosophical weight of the actual habits and the reader's real-world experience of navigating what many feel are incredibly contrived anecdotes and exhaustive padding. So where exactly does this leave us? The principles Covey outlined, taking fundamental responsibility, prioritizing your values, practicing empathetic listening, and committing to self-renewal, they remain incredibly potent. They are the actual scaffolding of highly effective leadership. Yet the vehicle delivering these ideas is undeniably a product of its time, exhaustive, repetitive, and heavily padded. As Covey himself taught, true effectiveness requires a delicate balance, and it seems that applies to literature just as much as it applies to life. This brings us to a compelling contradiction at the very heart of modern success culture. Does true productivity genuinely stem from deep, fundamental character, as Covey argues, or have modern success systems simply become built on buzzwords, padding, and superficial optimization? What is your perspective on this? Let's debate the philosophy versus the presentation in the comments below.